Please don't lock that door, dialysis patient pleaded. What hell's angels did moved everyone. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Please don't lock that door, sir. I just need the warm room until the 5:35 bus. Wallace Hobbs's voice cracked on the last word, thin and dry, from a dialysis chair he had left less than an hour earlier. His empty stainless steel thermos hung from two shaking fingers, and a bent medical transit card showed through the clear sleeve on his coat, the plastic edge rubbed white from years of use. Behind the glass, Morris Trent lifted a ring of keys and tapped the posted sign that said cleaning hour, while the digital clock above the ticket window glowed 4:18 a.m. in hard red numbers. Outside, Morris said, "Lobby's closed." The threat was not loud, but it was immediate. One locked door, one sick man, one underground passage already cold enough for breath to fog in front of his mouth. Then heavy boots struck the concrete stairs behind them, slow and deep, each step echoing down the tunnel like a tool dropped inside an empty tank. A wide shadow stretched across the floor before the man appeared, carrying the smell of old engine oil, damp denim, and cigarette smoke ground into road-worn clothes. Duke Tread Larson, 58, a white Hells Angels biker, with a gray beard, a scar along one cheek, and a black leather and denim cut over broad shoulders, stopped 3 feet from Wallace and spoke in a ruined, stone-thick voice that sounded like stones being dragged across pavement. "That man got a medical card?" Wallace flinched before he could stop himself. He had seen big men before, and in a bus tunnel, before sunrise, size could feel like another locked door. Duke noticed. He did not step closer. He lowered his chin, pulled one glove off slowly, and let his bare hand hang open beside his leg, not raised, not reaching, just human. The underground bus waiting hall sat beneath 3 lanes of sleeping city traffic, sealed away from the street by stained tile walls and a stairwell that swallowed sound. Moisture clung to the concrete ceiling in dark beads, and somewhere above the platform, an old vent coughed out air that smelled like wet stone, mop water, and rusted pipes. The heated lobby was only 12 feet away, bright behind glass, with orange plastic seats, and a wall heater ticking softly under a safety notice. Wallace could see the heat. He just could not reach it. Morris stood inside, with his station jacket zipped halfway, and his name badge turned slightly toward the glass. He was white, grown, and hard-faced in the way some men became when a small amount of authority sat on their chest all night. "Cleaning hour," he repeated, as if the 2 words were stronger than the old man's medical card. He missed his bus. "Not my problem." Wallace tried to straighten, but his knees did not fully answer. He had a folded hospital discharge sheet in his pocket, one corner damp from his own palm, and a small paper bracelet still circled his wrist, where the clinic had checked him out after treatment. He was 62, but that morning the cold made him look older. His cough came out dry. It bounced off the tile and returned smaller. Duke's eyes moved, from the bracelet to the thermos, from the thermos to the locked door, then to the acrylic rules board bolted beside the lobby entrance. He did not curse. He did not threaten Morris. 2 other adult bikers waited back by the stair rail, both quiet, both keeping distance, their boots planted where the tunnel wind could not shove straight into Wallace's legs. Duke angled his body between Wallace and the draft without making a show of it. The warmth from the lobby brushed the glass and died there. Morris turned one key in the lock with a smug little click. "You people can wait upstairs if you don't like it," he said. Duke looked at the rules board again, and something in his road-tired face changed from concern to attention. He had the look of a man who had spent years reading warehouse warnings before somebody got hurt, a man who knew small print could matter more than loud voices. He pointed, not at Morris, but at the lower corner of the sign. "Mr. Hobbs," he rasped, softer now. "Can I see that medical card?" Wallace looked down at the medical card, as if it had become heavier than the thermos in his other hand. The clear sleeve was cracked along one corner, and the blue stripe across the top had faded from being pulled in and out of his coat pocket for years of early rides, late pickups, and clinic doors that all smelled the same. He hesitated before giving it to Duke, not because he did not trust him yet, but because sick men learned to keep proof close, when proof was the only thing standing between them and being ignored. Duke did not take it fast. He opened his bare palm and waited until Wallace placed the card there himself. That mattered. Morris watched from behind the glass, with his keys hooked on one finger, pretending to be bored, while his eyes kept snapping toward the card. "That doesn't change cleaning hour," he said. His voice came flat, through the small speaker slot beside the door, distorted by cheap metal and old dust. "He can sit by the stairwell. Bus comes when it comes." Wallace's mouth tightened, but he did not argue. He had argued with appointment desks, insurance clerks, night dispatchers, and drivers who saw the word dialysis and treated him like a delay instead of a passenger. This time he had no strength left for it. The empty thermos tapped softly against his knee. Duke read the card under the yellow light, then looked at the hospital bracelet still around Wallace's wrist. "Renal dialysis transport," he rasped, each word rough as road grit under a tire. "Issued by the City Medical Ride Program. Expires next November." One of the adult bikers by the stair rail, a white man, with a trimmed silver beard and a canvas tool pouch strapped over his jacket, quietly dragged a metal chair away from the draft line without scraping it loud. Another stood near the tunnel mouth, not blocking the passage, just letting his broad back cut down the cold air pushing through. Nobody made a speech. They just adjusted the room around Wallace. Wallace lowered himself onto the chair, with care, both hands first, then one knee, then the other, like every joint had to be asked politely. The seat was cold through his pants. The concrete under his shoes had a thin shine of moisture, and the soles of his worn brown loafers made a faint sticking sound when he shifted his feet. Above them, a fluorescent tube blinked twice and settled into a weak hum. Morris unlocked the inner janitor closet, pulled out a yellow mop bucket, and rolled it 3 feet into view as if the bucket itself proved his side of the story. "See that," he said. "Scheduled maintenance. I got floors to close." Duke did not look at the bucket first. He looked at the floor. No wet sign was unfolded. No mop water touched the tile inside the heated lobby. No supply cart blocked the seats. The wall heater kept ticking, patient and useless behind the glass. "Where's the active cleaning zone?" Duke asked. Morris gave a short laugh. "You some kind of inspector?" Duke slid Wallace's card back into the clear sleeve and handed it to him, with 2 fingers, careful not to bend it. "No," he said. "Warehouse manager. 23 years. I read signs before people got crushed by bad shortcuts." The word crushed hung there, not violent, not aimed at Morris, just old experience speaking through a ruined throat. Wallace's eyes moved to Duke's face, and for the first time he saw more than beard, scar, patches, and road grime. He saw a man counting details. Duke stepped closer to the acrylic rules board mounted beside the lobby door. Moisture had fogged the lower right corner, and a brown water trail ran down across the small print. He lifted his phone, turned on the flashlight, and held the beam steady, without touching the glass. "There," he said. "Section 7. Morris stopped rolling the mop bucket. The keys quit jingling in his hand. Wallace leaned forward, breathing shallow, while the white cone of light cut through the damp air and landed on a line of city rules most passengers would never have noticed. Duke kept the phone light steady on the lower right corner of the acrylic board, where the letters had been half-blurred by damp air and a thin brown leak from the ceiling. He wiped the outside of the glass with the side of his bare thumb, slow enough that Morris could not pretend he was damaging anything, and the printed line came into focus beneath the beam. Section 7B, Duke read, his ruined voice scraping through the underground hall. Heated passenger lobby must remain accessible 24 hours during operating service, when temperature is below 40 degrees Fahrenheit for riders holding valid medical transit cards. The words did not sound dramatic by themselves. They sounded official. That made them worse for Morris. Wallace sat very still on the cold metal chair, his empty thermos resting across his knees, both hands folded, over it as if he were afraid one wrong move would make the rule disappear. The white glow from Duke's phone cut a narrow path through the misty air, and every man in that tunnel could see the small print now. 24 hours, below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, valid medical transit cards. 3 lines. Enough. Morris rolled the yellow mop bucket another inch with his shoe, but the wheels squeaked too loudly in the quiet and made him look less certain than before. That's general policy, he snapped through the speaker slot. It doesn't cover cleaning closures. Duke did not turn from the sign. He moved the light down 2 more lines, then across the bottom, checking for exceptions the way a man checks a loading manifest for missing numbers. No cleaning exception listed under cold weather medical access, he said. No supervisor override printed here either. His tone stayed flat. That frightened Morris more than anger would have. Wallace's breath trembled out white in front of his face, then broke into another dry cough that echoed along the tiled passage and came back from the stairwell like somebody answering from far away. One of the adult bikers near the tunnel mouth shifted his boots, not forward, just sideways, keeping the draft off Wallace's legs. The other adjusted the chair angle by 2 inches, so Wallace's shoulder was no longer lined up, with the cold air coming under the stair door. Small things. Human things. Duke glanced at Wallace's bent medical card, then at the hospital bracelet, then at the rules board again. The old warehouse habit was working inside him now, the same habit that had once made him stop forklifts, red tag cracked pallets, and read every warning label twice before someone paid for a shortcut with their body. He had learned that careless men loved vague words. He also knew vague words hated being read out loud. Morris folded his arms behind the glass. You got no authority here. Duke finally looked at him. His gray beard was damp at the edges, his scar pale under the station lights, and the Hell's Angel-style patches on his road-worn cut sat heavy over his chest without needing explanation. Then you won't mind giving me your full name and employee number, Duke said. Morris's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No clean answer came out. It's on the badge, Wallace whispered, before he could stop himself, and the sentence seemed to cost him more breath than it should have. Duke nodded once, not making Wallace repeat it. He lifted the flashlight beam from the rules board and placed it gently on Morris's chest through the glass. Not in his eyes, not as a threat, just on the plastic rectangle clipped crooked to the station jacket. Morris Trent, Duke read. Station Supervisor. Badge MT, 417. Morris reached up fast and tried to turn the badge inward, but the number had already landed in the cold air between them. Duke took one slow step back, giving the glass door room, giving Morris room, giving Wallace room to breathe. Mr. Trent, he said, each word grinding out of his throat like stone under a tire. I'm going to ask once, before I make the record official. Are you denying a 62-year-old dialysis passenger with a valid medical transit card access to the heated lobby while this station is under 40 degrees? The heater ticked behind the locked door. The red light on the magnetic latch glowed steady. Morris's keys shook once in his hand. Morris did not answer the question. He stared at Duke through the glass, then looked past him toward the 2 adult bikers by the stair rail, as if their silence might give him something to complain about. It did not. They were white, grown men in road-worn denim and black leather, standing wide enough to cut the tunnel draft, but far enough back to leave the walkway open. No one touched the door. No one raised a voice. Wallace sat with his shoulders pulled inward, the empty thermos across his knees, listening to the heater tick from the room he was not allowed to enter. That little sound hurt. Morris shoved the mop bucket closer to the lobby seats and said, I'm not discussing city policy with some motorcycle guy at 4 in the morning. Duke looked at the digital clock above the ticket window. The red numbers had changed to 4:24 a.m., and the next medical route bus was still more than an hour away. He glanced once at Wallace's hospital bracelet, once at the fog gathering on the bottom edge of the locked glass, then brought his phone down from the rules board. His thumb moved across the cracked screen with practiced calm. Hotline numbers printed right here, he rasped. Morris's jaw tightened. That line's for complaints during business hours. Duke tilted the phone so the small print caught the flashlight beam. It says recorded 24 hours. The tunnel seemed to shrink around those words. Water dripped from a ceiling seam into a dark stain near the yellow safety strip, one drop every few seconds, steady as a clock nobody wanted to hear. Wallace's breathing had turned shallow again, and when he coughed, he tried to bury it in his sleeve like an apology. Duke noticed that too. He did not comfort him with a speech. He simply shifted one boot, half a step, blocking another finger of cold air slipping down from the stairwell. The phone clicked, rang twice, and an automated voice from the city transit department filled the underground hall, tinny and official. After-hours passenger safety complaint line. Please state station location, employee information, and nature of incident. Morris's face changed by inches, not all at once. First his eyes moved to the badge he had turned sideways. Then his hand went to the keys. Then sweat shone along his upper lip even, though the air outside the lobby was cold enough to numb fingers. Duke spoke into the phone, slow and exact. Underground East Alder Transit Waiting Hall, Lower Bus Concourse. Time is 4:25 a.m. Station Supervisor Morris Trent, badge MT, 417, is denying heated lobby access to a 62-year-old dialysis passenger with a valid city medical transit card, while the posted rule, Section 7B, requires 24-hour access under 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Morris pressed one palm against the inside of the glass, not hard enough to break anything, just enough to make Wallace flinch. You can't record me like that. Duke's eyes stayed steady. The city line asked for employee information. The automated voice beeped again. Duke continued before Morris could fill the silence with another excuse. He described the locked magnetic latch with its red indicator light, the unused mop bucket, the dry lobby floor, the closed heated room, the passenger's hospital bracelet, and the visible medical card. He kept every sentence plain. Plain words carried farther. Morris backed away from the glass and fumbled with a clipboard on the counter, flipping pages as if a hidden exception might rise from the paper and save him. I have discretion, he said, but the word came out thin. Duke looked at the rules board, then at Wallace, then back to the glass. Discretion ends where medical access starts. Wallace lifted his eyes. Something in him loosened when he heard that. Not hope exactly, not yet, but the first small belief that the cold was not his fault. Morris grabbed the ring of keys again, then stopped with his hand halfway to the lock, trapped between pride and procedure. Behind him, the heater kept ticking, warm air wasting itself on empty orange chairs. Duke held the phone closer to his mouth. Supervisor has been informed of posted policy and is refusing to open the heated lobby at this time, he said. The recording beeped once more, sharp and clean, and Morris Trent finally looked at the red latch, as if it had become a witness. Morris kept his hand near the keys, but he did not turn them. Pride held him there, stiff and ugly, while the city complaint line waited in Duke's phone, with that patient mechanical silence only a recording system could have. Wallace watched the red latch glow on the glass door, and for one strange second he felt as if the whole underground hall had narrowed down to that small light. Red meant stay out. Red meant be quiet. Red meant wait, where the cold could reach you. Duke lowered the phone just enough to check that the recording was still active, then raised his eyes to the lobby again. He was not studying Morris's face now. He was studying the room. The orange seats were dry, the floor had no mop shine, and the heater under the safety board clicked every 12 seconds, with steady little pings. Behind the counter, a trash can sat half open beside the janitor closet, its clear liner pulled tight around the rim. Something white and torn showed near the top. One of the adult bikers by the stair rail noticed Duke's glance and moved without drama. He did not step into Morris's space. He did not touch the locked door. He simply walked to the public side trash bin outside the glass, where 3 torn paper strips had been shoved between a coffee cup and a damp paper towel. He lifted them with 2 fingers and held them out where Duke could see. Same form, the man said quietly. Duke took the strips, laid them flat across the back of the cold metal chair beside Wallace, and used his phone light to line up the torn edges. The paper read temporary cleaning closure across the top, with a blank space for time, date, and supervisor initials. The first strip showed 3:50 a.m. to 5:10 a.m. The second showed 4:05 a.m. to 5:20 a.m. The third was torn through the date, but the same badge initials sat in the corner, MT. Morris saw the papers and immediately started talking too fast. Those are old. That's nothing. Every station uses temporary closure sheets. Duke did not accuse him of anything. That was the sharpest part. He only placed the papers under the beam and read what was physically there. 3 closures, he rasped into the phone. All during early medical route hours. All marked with the same supervisor initials. Wallace's fingers tightened around the empty thermos until the steel made a faint denting sound under his weak hold. His eyes stayed on the forms. 2 Tuesdays ago, he said, barely above the vent hum. I was here after treatment. He told me the lobby heater was for ticketed riders only. The words slipped out before he could hide them. His face changed as soon as he heard himself speak, like he expected punishment for remembering. Duke turned to him slowly. You had your card then? Wallace nodded once. Yes, sir. The sir sounded old-fashioned and tired, and it made Duke's jaw work under his gray beard. He did not ask Wallace to repeat it. He did not make the sick man perform his hurt for the recording. He said it himself, plain and careful. Passenger states this may be a repeated denial of heated access after dialysis transport. Morris backed toward the counter, knocking the clipboard sideways with his elbow. Papers slid onto the floor inside the warm room. He bent to gather them, then stopped, sweating now, his station jacket pulled crooked across his shoulders. You people don't know how these shifts work, he snapped, but the words had lost their weight. The tunnel answered him, with a drip from the ceiling and Wallace's small, dry cough. Duke held the medical card out toward Wallace, not pulling it away from him, just asking with his eyes. Wallace understood. After a long second, he set the card back into Duke's open palm. The plastic was cold. Duke read the identifying line into the recording, leaving out anything private that did not belong in the air, then handed it back at once. Valid city medical transit card confirmed, he said. Renal dialysis, transport noted. Morris stared at the red latch again. Duke folded the torn closure slips together and set them on the chair beside the thermos, under the light, where they looked smaller than the damage they had caused. His voice dropped even lower, rough as stone under a boot heel. Mr. Trent, you locked the wrong man out in the cold. The complaint line gave another short beep, then the automated voice returned, with colder patience than any person in that tunnel. If the passenger is currently denied access to required heated shelter, state whether the denial is ongoing. Morris heard it. Wallace heard it. Even the heater behind the glass seemed to pause between ticks, as if the room itself were waiting for the answer. Duke looked at the red latch, the torn closure slips, Wallace's bent medical card, and Morris's crooked badge through the glass. Denial is ongoing, he said. Morris moved at once. Not bravely, not kindly. He jerked the key ring up, so fast the metal teeth clattered against each other, then fumbled for the square black access fob clipped beside them. Hold on, he snapped, though nobody had touched him, nobody had crowded him, nobody had done anything except read his own rules back into a city recorder. Sweat had gathered at his temple and run into the gray hair above his ear. His hand shook enough that the fob missed the reader the first time and struck the glass with a dull plastic tap. Wallace watched the movement with a tired disbelief, as if he did not trust warmth, until the door itself admitted it existed. Duke kept the phone lowered near his chest, still recording, but he angled his body away from Morris to give the man room to open the lobby without feeling cornered. That was control. The second fob swipe landed clean. The magnetic latch gave 2 small beeps. The red indicator blinked once, then changed to green. A seam of warm air slid out through the glass door before Morris even pulled it open, carrying the smell of dust heated on old coils, floor cleaner, and stale coffee from a forgotten cup behind the counter. Wallace closed his eyes for half a second. The warmth touched his face first. Morris stepped back into the lobby, still trying to talk over his own fear. This is temporary, he said. I'm documenting everything. I've got 29 years in this job, and I'm not losing my record over one misunderstanding. Duke did not smile. Then write it right. Morris's jaw worked, but no sharp answer came. He grabbed the clipboard off the counter, saw the scattered papers on the floor, and kicked one lightly back under the desk, with the side of his shoe, more embarrassed than angry now. Duke saw it, but did not chase the little act. The main door was open. Wallace was still outside it. That came first. One of the adult bikers behind Wallace shifted the cold metal chair aside, clearing a straight path to the lobby entrance. Another stood near the stairwell, with his hands tucked low, watching the draft line and nothing else. Wallace tried to rise too quickly and nearly sat back down from weakness, but Duke only lowered his shoulder a little and spoke in that groundstone voice. "Slow, Mr. Hobbs. No hurry left in this part." Wallace nodded, placed his thermos under one arm, and pushed up with both hands on his knees. His loafers squeaked against the damp concrete. The hospital bracelet slid down his wrist as he moved, its small printed barcode catching the phone light. Morris glanced at it, then away, and something human flickered across his face before pride covered it again. Duke did not touch Wallace unless asked. He walked half a step beside him, close enough to catch a stumble, far enough to leave the old man his dignity. The distance was the kindness. When Wallace crossed the threshold, the orange lobby lights made him look less gray at once, though his shoulders still trembled under his thin coat. The heater ticked under the safety board, no longer useless, and the glass door stood open behind him like an admission of guilt. The automated line beeped again. "Please state whether access has been restored." Duke looked at Morris, letting him hear the choice, before he answered. Morris swallowed, turned the keys in his palm, and stared at the green latch. Duke lifted the phone. "Access restored at 4:33 a.m. Supervisor opened the heated lobby. After policy was read, and badge MT 417 was identified." Morris flinched at the badge number, then hurried to the supply cabinet beside the counter and pulled it open with too much force. Inside were sealed emergency blankets, paper cups, and a printed sheet labeled Medical Passenger Cold Weather Support. Duke's eyes landed on the sheet. So did Morris's. For once, Morris did not argue with the words on the wall. He took down one folded blanket and held it in both hands, stiff and awkward, while Wallace lowered himself into the nearest orange seat and let the heat reach his fingers. Morris stood in front of Wallace, with the folded emergency blanket held out like a man unsure whether help could burn his fingers. The blanket was still sealed in clear plastic, stamped City Transit Cold Weather Support in blue letters, and the tear strip had never been pulled. Wallace looked at it for a second before taking it, not because he was proud, but because being offered what should have been automatic felt strange, after years of asking quietly for less. "Thank you," he said. Morris looked away before the words could land. Duke stayed near the open lobby door, one boot on the warm side, one boot near the threshold, where the cold still breathed in from the tunnel. He did not let the door swing shut yet. One of the adult bikers outside picked up the torn closure slips from the chair and set them neatly on the counter inside, beside the clipboard, where Morris could not pretend they had vanished. Another white, grown biker with oil-dark gloves reached into a saddlebag-style pack he had carried down from the stairwell and pulled out a dented black thermos with a strip of silver tape around the lid. "Still warm," he said. Duke took it, unscrewed the cap, and held the steam near his own knuckles first to test it. Then he poured 2 inches of warm water into a small paper cup from the supply cabinet and passed it to Wallace with both care and distance. "Small sips," Duke rasped. Wallace wrapped both hands around the cup, and the tremor in his fingers softened by a little, not gone, but less alone. The wall heater ticked under the safety board, pushing dry warmth across the orange seats, and moisture on the glass began to fade in cloudy streaks. Outside the lobby, the underground tunnel remained gray and wet, smelling of concrete and old pipes. Inside, there was stale coffee, floor cleaner, warm dust, and the faint motor oil scent clinging to Duke's clothes. It was not pretty. It was shelter. Morris took the clipboard and began writing a report, with hard little strokes, pressing so firmly that the pen scratched through the top sheet. "Passenger admitted at 4:33 a.m. After clarification of cold weather policy," he muttered, more to the paper than to anyone else. Duke's eyes moved to the line. "Write medical transit card," he said. Morris's pen stopped. Duke did not raise his voice. He did not have to. "Write dialysis passenger. Write section 7B. Write badge MT 417. Paper protects the truth only if the truth gets on it." Wallace looked up from the cup, and the sentence seemed to settle somewhere deep in him. He had thought rules belonged to people behind counters, people with keys, people who could say closed and make the world smaller. Duke made the rule feel different. A rail. A handle. Something a tired man could hold. Morris swallowed and added the words. His face stayed tight, but his hand obeyed the paper. The adult biker, with the silver beard, pulled another chair closer to Wallace, not too close, and set Wallace's empty thermos upright on it like it deserved a place too. The old man watched that small motion and blinked hard. "I didn't mean to cause all this," he whispered. Duke turned his bare hand palm up, resting it on his own knee. The scars across his knuckles were old and pale, but his fingers stayed open, loose, patient. "You didn't cause it," he said, his ruined throat grinding each word down until it sounded almost gentle. "You sat where the city said you could sit." The complaint line on his phone ended with a confirmation number, 6 digits spoken by the automated voice and repeated by Duke, into his notes app. He showed the screen to Wallace without making him touch it. 681942. "That's yours if you want it later." Wallace nodded, eyes wet but steady. Morris heard the number too and wrote faster. In the small heated lobby beneath the sleeping city, nobody cheered, nobody laughed at him, nobody turned the moment into a show. The bikers simply stayed, their boots quiet on the tile, their bodies placed where cold air tried to enter. Wallace took another small sip of warm water and held the blanket across his knees. For the first time that morning, his cough did not echo back from the tunnel. The confirmation number stayed on Duke's phone screen, while the lobby settled into a kind of quiet Wallace had not expected to feel in a bus station at 4:40 in the morning. It was not peaceful exactly. The heater still clicked, the pipes still knocked behind the tiled wall, and the tunnel outside still breathed cold fog through the open doorway every time air moved down from the street stairs. But the cold no longer owned the room. The adult bikers did not crowd Wallace or turn him into a project. They arranged themselves with the easy discipline of men who had spent years waiting beside broken engines, bad roads, and people who needed silence more than advice. One stood near the lobby threshold, his shoulders cutting the draft without blocking the exit. Another wiped condensation from the inside of the glass with a folded paper towel so Wallace could see the tunnel lights and the bus lane beyond them. Duke sat one chair away, leaving space between them, his gloved hand resting on his knee and his bare hand wrapped loosely around the dented thermos cap. He smelled faintly of old oil, tobacco smoke, and wet denim. Wallace held the warm paper cup in both hands. The emergency blanket lay across his knees, silver side folded inward, so it would not flash in his tired eyes. "Worst part isn't always the needles," Wallace said, after a long while. His voice was low, almost hidden under the heater fan. "It's coming out after, and everybody's already decided you're slow on purpose." Duke turned his head, but he did not interrupt. The scar on his cheek caught the lobby light, and his gray beard moved slightly when he breathed through his nose. Wallace stared at the cup. "You stand there trying to find your card, trying to remember which pocket has the paper, and folks look at you like you're holding up their whole morning. After a while, you start apologizing before anybody even says anything." The words hung in the warm room. Even Morris heard them. He was behind the counter, pretending to align forms in a tray, but his pen had stopped moving. He could not turn Wallace into a policy problem anymore. He had heard the man. Duke rubbed one thumb over the thermos cap, slow and rough. "Being tired ain't a crime," he said. It came out like road grit under a boot, but there was no hardness pointed at Wallace. Morris cleared his throat and lifted the radio from its charging dock. "Medical route 535, he said, into it, his voice stiff. "Lower concourse passenger waiting inside heated lobby. Confirm stop." A crackle answered. The adult driver's voice came back, through static, clear enough to hear. "Confirmed. Arrival in 7 minutes. 7 minutes. Wallace blinked as if that small number had weight. One of the bikers checked the wall clock, then looked down the tunnel through the wiped glass. Far beyond the platform curve, two white headlights blurred in the fog, vanished, then appeared again lower and brighter. The bus was real. Morris set the radio down too carefully. "I'll note that passenger was accommodated," he muttered. Duke did not look away from the glass. "Note that he should have been accommodated before the complaint." Morris's face tightened, but this time he wrote. The pen scratched across the report. Medical transit card, Section 7B, access restored, confirmation 681942. Wallace watched the letters form upside down from his chair, and something in his chest eased that had nothing to do with the heater. When the bus rolled into the underground lane, its brakes sighed through the concrete hollow like a tired animal coming home. Duke stood first, then waited while Wallace tucked the bent medical card back into the clear sleeve, folded his hospital discharge sheet once, and set the empty thermos upright in his coat pocket. "You got everything?" Duke asked. Wallace patted each item slowly. Card, paper, thermos, blanket, confirmation number written on a cup sleeve. "Everything," he said. Duke nodded toward the opening door and the waiting adult driver beyond it. "Then we walked slow." The bikers moved, with him, not around him, their boots quiet on the tile, as the warm lobby light stretched out into the fog. Wallace stepped through the lobby doorway, with the emergency blanket folded over one arm, the paper cup sleeve, with confirmation number 681,942 tucked carefully behind his medical transit card. The adult driver leaned from the open bus door, a white woman, with silver hair under her transit cap, and lowered the step without rushing him. "Take your time, sir," she said. Wallace paused at the edge of the platform, not because he could not move, but because the warm yellow light from the lobby reached only so far before the tunnel fog swallowed it. Duke stood beside him, close enough to steady the air around him, not close enough to steal the effort. Morris hovered behind the counter, holding the incident report like it had gained weight in his hands. He had written every required line. Section 7B, valid medical transit card, dialysis passenger, access restored at 4:33 a.m. Supervisor badge MT, 417. The words were there now. Paper could not shiver, but it could remember. Wallace climbed one step, then the next, holding the bus rail, with fingers still pale from the cold. The driver waited until he reached the front seat nearest the heater before she closed the door halfway against the draft. "You want that blanket open?" she asked. Wallace nodded, and she helped him spread it over his knees, with the ordinary care of someone doing a job the right way. Duke passed the empty stainless steel thermos up to him through the open door. Wallace took it with both hands, then looked down at the dented lid, the faded medical card, the hospital bracelet still circling his wrist, and the paper cup sleeve marked with 6 dark numbers. When he looked back, his eyes were wet, but his voice did not break this time. "I thought I was going to sit out there till morning." Duke's gray beard moved as he swallowed. The tunnel lights made the old scar on his cheek look carved from wax, and his black leather and denim, Hell's Angels-style cut, carried the smell of wet denim, road dust, and engine oil into the bus doorway. "Bus is here now," he rasped, the words rough as stones dragged over concrete. Wallace gave a small nod, then raised 2 fingers from the thermos in a tired salute. Duke answered by touching 2 bare fingers to the edge of his brow. Nothing more. Morris stepped out from the lobby at last, holding the report and the unused closure forms. "Mr. Hobbs," he said, stiffly, as if the name hurt his mouth. Wallace turned. Morris looked at the floor first, then forced his eyes up. "The lobby will stay open during cold weather medical access." It was not a full apology. It was a beginning with ink on it. Wallace accepted it, with one quiet nod, because he had no extra strength to spend on making the man smaller. The driver closed the bus door. Air brakes sighed, soft and deep, and the coach eased forward through the underground fog. Behind the glass, Wallace settled into the heater's glow, with the blanket across his knees and the empty thermos upright beside him. Duke and the other adult bikers stayed on the platform, until the red taillights blurred around the curve and disappeared. Then Duke turned back toward the lobby, picked up one crushed paper cup from the damp concrete, and dropped it into the trash as the green latch light hummed steadily beside the open heated door. This story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment, reflection, and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is purely coincidental.